Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 1 of week 2, and the topic of this week is the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. And in this we will study today a very important thinker whose name is Max Horkheimer. So, you can see that in this lecture we will first understand who was Max Horkheimer and what was his background, and then we will analyze what are the important contributions of Max Horkheimer to the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. So, Max Horkheimer was the chief proponent of the Frankfurt School. We know that he was almost like the father figure of the Frankfurt School, and he was the director of the Institute of Social Research and professor of social philosophy at the University of Frankfurt from 1930 to 1933, and again he was holding that position from 1949 to 1958. So, you can see that for a considerable period of time he was at the helm of affairs of the Institute of Social Research, which is known as one of the, or you can say the founding institution for the establishment of the critical theory. In between those periods, he led the institute in exile and primarily in America. Because of the rise of Hitler in Germany, he had to shift the institute and he operated from America. He is best known for his work, which is titled The Dialectic of Enlightenment, which was co-authored with another very notable philosopher associated with the Frankfurt School, and his name was Theodor Adorno. His writings from 1930 was largely responsible for actually developing the epistemological and methodological orientation of Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. So, basically he was the founding father of developing the entire school of critical theory to which so many thinkers and scholars got attached at the later period of time, and he was responsible for developing the epistemological and the methods which will be used in the critical theory. So, therefore, his contribution is the most important contribution if you try to understand the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. After he took the directorship of Frankfurt School in 1930, he basically changed the character of Frankfurt School from orthodox Marxism to practical Marxism. So, basically the institute shape, objectives, programs got dramatically changed after Max Horkheimer assumed the chair, or assumed, you can say, the directorship of Frankfurt School in 1930. And earlier the emphasis of the institute, or the perspective and objective, or the method of the institute was the orthodox Marxism. But after coming of Max Horkheimer, he changed it to practical Marxism, because he wanted to connect the theoretical precepts of Marxism with the practicalities of life. He wanted to address the various social injustices or exploitations which were going on in the capitalist society or in the modern society, and how they can be understood and explained with the help of the Marxist concept. And therefore, he provided a critical analysis of enlightenment, reason and culture industry. So, if you have a look at his work, he has covered a very wide range of topic. He has made a critique of enlightenment tradition. He has talked about the rise of mass culture and mass society. He has talked about the importance of reason and how that has been used to conquer so called nature, and also he has elaborated in detail about the culture industry. So, with the help of practical Marxism, he tried to give a new understanding of the capitalist society from the Marxist perspective, or in other words, a new Marxist perspective of the capitalist society. So, therefore, we can see that the chief focus of Max Horkheimer was on the study and all the injustices and oppressive practices of the capitalist society. He gave his inaugural lecture as director of the institute on January 24, 1931, and the lecture was titled "The Present Situation of Social Philosophy and the Task of an Institute of Social Research," which spoke about the idea of interdisciplinary social research, which was the goal of critical theory. Now, you can see in his inaugural lecture itself and from the title of his lecture, where he is actually making two important points, and the first is that what is the present situation of social philosophy and what are the tasks of Institute of Social Research. And by making an analysis, he has actually set the roadmap for the Institute of Social Research or for the building up of the critical theory. And there he spoke about the idea of interdisciplinary social research, which was the goal of critical theory, because one of the important tenets of critical theory, which we have already studied when we were studying the critical traditions in week 1, there I have explained that one of its objective was to delve into various disciplines so that we can understand how different causes are interlinked with each other behind any oppressive practices. And therefore, he advocated for a balanced integration of philosophy and social sciences, and also attempted to bridge the gap between values and practice, because he said that if the emphasis is only on the philosophical studies, then the values and the great ideals of philosophy cannot be applied and cannot be connected with the practical problems of society, and social sciences needs to be understood and analyzed, because that is the discipline where we can understand the various social and economic problems human beings are experiencing every day. So, social science actually talks about, or it is the study of what is happening in the society. So, when we combine philosophy with social sciences, then we can better make a combination of so called the values with the practice. So, therefore, he said that we cannot have a strict separation between the philosophical approach and the study of social sciences. There is need for integration between the two. Similarly, there is need for integration between values and practice, because if you only talk about values, then they will be having no relevance if they cannot be applied in practice, or we do not know how to apply the values in practice. And if we talk only about the understanding of practice without talking about values, then we will be going nowhere, because values provide the guide or the road map from where to go and actually what is the objective of our development, or what are the goals of our society. Now, he was critical of positivism because of the specialized nature of science, which focuses on the technical details of the areas which is it studying. Because since the nature of science is so specialized, it is so technical in nature, because the emphasis is more on the techniques, that it focuses only on the technical details. Even if we are using that method to understand the disciplines of social sciences, there also the emphasis is more on the techniques, on the methods, rather than what we are studying or what is our objective. So, that is actually leading to, you can say, a disconnection of science with the other aspects of life or with other aspects of society. So, therefore, he argued that it resulted in the inability of science to see the total picture, and hence it could not work for the emancipation or betterment of the society. Because if you are focusing only on the technical aspects, the other aspects of any problem, any situation or event will get neglected, and it will not get a holistic picture of what is happening in the society. And we need a holistic picture to understand the various nuances of the problem, and for that he argues that science is ill equipped and therefore it is not able to provide in the real sense of the term for the advancement or betterment of the society. Science also got disconnected from society because of its too much emphasis on facts. So, when you are giving too much emphasis on facts and not so much bothered about what is happening in the real life, then it leads to a disconnection which is ultimately harmful for the society. Because all the scientific developments which have been made, if they are not used in a proper perspective, or if they are not used for the welfare of human society, then we know that how much destruction and how much you can say ill effect it can have on the well-being of human lives. We have many examples to prove this point. So, in 1937, in his essay, that is Traditional and Critical Theory, he talked about the manifesto of Frankfurt School. So, you can see that he has not only made clear the goals and the objectives of the Frankfurt School, but he also talked about the manifesto, or what the Frankfurt School intends to do in his essay, which is titled The Traditional and Critical Theory. And as the name suggests, he also made a distinction between what we mean by critical theory and how it is different from the traditional theory. But before that, we must understand other three types of theories, and which also includes the critical theory, and how they can be helpful in understanding the distinction between traditional theory and critical theory. So, Horkheimer actually talks about three types of theories: social theories, scientific social theories, and critical social theories. Now, the first two theories, that is social theories and scientific social theories, they belong to the traditional theories, and the critical theory, which is the third type of theory, has been adopted by the Frankfurt School. Now, he argues that all the traditional theories, they focus on consistency and on the distinction between theory and practice. We know that one of the important feature of the critical tradition or critical theory is that they have continuously talked about interlinking of the theory and practice, then facts and values, philosophy and science, and therefore, he argues that the traditional theory is not able to make a synthesis between the theory and practice, and also it focuses on consistency. So, consistency is not the objective of the critical theory, because critical theory is challenging, it is calling for change, it is asking for transformation. So, therefore, it cannot talk in terms of consistency. He also rejected the notion of objective knowledge by pointing out that the object of knowledge is embedded within a social and historical process. So, objective knowledge basically is connected with science. Science talks that we can gain objectively the knowledge about various things around us by following certain scientific methods. We can obtain a neutral investigation into the problems that we are investigating by following certain means methodology, and the knowledge which is thus produced is known as objective knowledge, because it is free from any bias, it is obtained in a very neutral and in a very detached situation. But Horkheimer says that the objective knowledge is of not much use in the critical theory, because any object of knowledge is not detached, is not neutral, and cannot be studied by separating it from the social, economic and political conditions in which it is placed. So, therefore, he said that every object is embedded in social and historical processes that we have to understand. Now, we know that he made a critique of enlightenment reason, and he emphasized that how reason, which has been responsible for the emancipation of human being from the clutches of the medieval era, which has talked about individual and individual rights, that same reason has been used in a way that it has led to so much of ills and problems in the human society. And he, along with his colleague Adorno, wrote a very important work which is known as the Dialectic of Enlightenment, and it was published in the year 1947. In that work, he, along with Adorno, had given many critiques of the Enlightenment tradition. First of all, the Enlightenment seeks to undermine myth, yet in doing so, it tries to rigidify into a new myth, namely the reduction of reason to the claims of positive science. So, just I have mentioned that how the Enlightenment tradition have challenged and questioned all the myths and so called the prejudiced practices of the medieval era, and they said that the myths have no place in human society, but in its goal to achieve its objective, it itself became a type of myth when it reduced the reason to the claims of positive science. So, when they surrendered to the positive science dictates, then it also became a myth, it also got rigid in its assumptions and its calculations. Thus, it ends up perpetrating a new form of irrationality in the guise of rationality. So, we know that reason is nothing but rationality, and this rationality was supposed to challenge all those traditions and superstitions, myths and so many other things. Now, which was supposed to challenge all those things, and they did it, but after some time they became surrendered to the dictates of science, and when they started working, or you can say the so called rationality was being used to fulfill the demands of science or the dictates of science, then it became irrational. So, though it was still considered as rational, but actually behind the rationality it became irrational in nature and it started functioning in an irrational way. Therefore, he said that enlightenment is a mass deception. It is why it is called a type of deception, because in the name of progress, in the name of development, in the name of promising autonomy, it failed to fulfill the promises, and in the name of rationality, it actually promoted various forms of irrational behavior and activities in the society. Though reason brought about progress in critical thought, but because of the impact of technology, it caused dehumanizing rationalization of human society. So, we have just said that reason had its own contribution. Rationality could challenge various practices of the medieval era and could extract individual and his rights from the clutches of various types of bondages. So, that is no doubt one of the important you can say achievement, and it is also itself a type of critical tradition. But unfortunately, what happened that the impact of science and technology became so over empowering that it subdued the so called reason and rationality, and it led to a type of society which led to dehumanization of human beings, that is, it robbed of the human essence of human society. So, when we actually are talking about dehumanization, we are meaning that it is absolving of all the human essence of human society, that which makes an individual a human being. And this is manifest in the types of alienation which human beings are facing in the society. Human beings are alienated not only from themselves, but also from the world they lived. And we will see in the subsequent lectures where we will study the notion of alienation in much more depth, where we will see that how alienation is actually working and manifested in multifarious forms in the present modern society. It is not simply the workers are getting alienated from themselves, from their work or from the human essence, from their co-workers, but it is also even the capitalist, even the managers, even the bureaucrats, even the ordinary consumers are also getting alienated in multifarious ways, and in their everyday activities of life they are manifesting this alienation. So, Max Horkheimer have talked about this process of alienation or this phenomena of alienation also in his work. In his book The Eclipse of Reason in 1947, he made distinction between subjective and objective reason. As the name suggests, eclipse of reason, that is, reason has faded away. And here he made a distinction between subjective and objective reason. Subjective reason is associated with means to a goal, where we are talking about or giving more importance to the means to achieve a certain goal. So, the emphasis is more on the means, whereas objective reason is associated with ends. We are concerned with our ends and we are not bothered what means we are using and what means we are using to attain that end. And the result of this objective reasoning is that the capitalist society and so called science and technology has been so captivated by this objective reasoning that they have forgotten that what type of measures and steps or activities they are indulging in and how much negative effect or deleterious effect it is causing on the various dimensions of society. For example, by giving the example of capitalism, Horkheimer argues that capitalism is so completely rooted in self-interest and individualism that it becomes completely destructive and inimical to the very goals it thought to achieve. So, it is becoming destructive of itself only, and the values on which the capitalist system is based, which is characterized by the notion of self-interest and individualism, excessive consumerism, and our so called separation from the various social roles and social groups are some of the reason why we are facing lots of negative consequences on account of such development. So, the capitalism is proving to be destructive in multifarious field. It has led to the rise of so many diseases. It has led to rise of alienation. It has led to rise of the conformist behavior. It has led to the rise of a type of homogenization of society where the individuality is lost. So, there are multiple spheres and levels at which the capitalism has caused destruction. Besides, it has caused enormous damage to the natural world. We will see in our subsequent lectures on ecological democracy and ecological citizenship that why we need an alternative paradigm of development, why we need an alternative paradigm of citizenship, so that we can become more sensitive to the ecological degeneration which is taking place or which is already taking place, and what steps we can take to preserve the environment. So, these are some of the various dimensions of the destructiveness of capitalism. Similarly, human beings in its drive to conquer nature have caused enormous ecological devastation, about which we will study in some more detail in the subsequent lectures. Now, his views on culture industry is very relevant. When the commodification of culture is rampant in the present society, much more or at a much larger level in comparison to the Horkheimer's time. He was talking in 1930s and 40s, and now we are in 2024. With mass media, how much you can say the so-called culture industry, the term which was used by Horkheimer and Adorno, has proliferated across our society, and what impact it is having on our individual thought processes, our choices, and also our behavior. And one of the important, the impact or the negative impact of this culture industry was that how traditional forms of art like painting, theatre, classical music are getting, they are getting outdated, and they are being taken over by mass media. So, we can find these type of original art or original art form to be at the periphery or to be found in certain selected corners of the society. It is not widely prevalent now. Now, what has taken over? The mass media and how it is projecting the various aspects of culture. Now, we have the virtual media. We can access the painting, we can access the theatres, we can access the play on the virtual media. So, there is no point in going and watching the real characters playing their role. So, therefore, it has led to devaluation of the traditional forms of art and literature. Now, culture industry denotes the commodification and then massification and the standardization of culture. Now, these are the three words which are very important to understand the evil consequences of culture industry. It has led to commodification, means everything is now being converted into a commodity which can be sold and purchased in the market if you have the money with you. And the massification means now it has been part of a mass culture. It is not something unique and distinctive, but it is just like any other mass products which are available in the society. And standardization of culture, the same culture is everywhere. There is a uniformity of culture. There is, you can say, a type of non-liking for the differences and more emphasis on the standard practices or the standards which are uniform in nature, which was like any other commodity mass produced by industrial capitalism. So, just like a product which is produced in mass number is of the same quality and nature, similarly culture is also produced in mass quantity which is having similar attributes and features. And this we can see in the type of films and in the type of plays which are being broadcast by the various channels which are associated with the different types of media. It also provided the ideological legitimacy to the capitalist system and socializing individuals to conform and fit into the society. So, it was not only selling of the cultural products, but it was also ideological, it was also an ideological indoctrination which led to the acceptance of the capitalist values and helped the individual to fit into the society. Now, Horkheimer and Adorno argued that the system of cultural production is dominated by mass communication, and it was controlled by commercial interest and advertising which functioned to strengthen the roots of consumerism and capitalism. So, two things are operating, one is the commercialization and second is the advertising industry, and how they are strengthening the roots of capitalism and also the consumerism tendency amongst the people. So, with that I come to the end of this lecture, followed by some more understanding about the contributions of Max Horkheimer in lecture 2 and 3. Now, we have some questions like who is Max Horkheimer, explain the key concepts of his political philosophy, what are the different types of theories and how critical theory is different from them, explain the term that is enlightenment as mass deception. So, with that I come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.